things do you look for, and how does that engagement process work?
Well, I'll tell you what we look for the most. We look for, the number one thing that I look for is leadership. So how smart are the people we're dealing with? Are they able to inspire a group of people to move rapidly? Are they focused to get the attention of their customers? Do they have the aptitude and ability to learn our new technologies? Right? And it starts with the leadership. If you've got a hungry, passionate, smart, aggressive leadership team, that will drive success. Many of you may have heard or know of Aperio. They're in this area. You meet Chris Barvin, the CEO of Aperio, or Narinda, the founder and head of marketing. You know exactly what I mean when you talk about a smart, hungry leadership team. And it's no wonder that we're our fastest growing consulting company over the last 10 years. We are now expanding with Aperio into Europe and into Japan, right? That's in 10 years, right? So, very aggressive company that's been epitome of success for us. So we model a lot of consulting companies on the leadership bench strength we see in companies like Aperio, companies like Blue Wolf, Model Metrics, Stadia, etc. That's what we look for. First and foremost, we look for the leadership culture.
Thank you, Denzel. Winston, if a startup or if some of the companies here want to be engaged with the tablets and netbook ecosystem, what is the engagement process and what kind of things do you look for?
Yeah, so let me just start by talking about the kinds of things that we're looking for. As you can imagine, with the emergence of devices like phones and tablets, really there's a lot of innovation that is actually needed to actually give the performance, the power, the experience, and the price point that will make it in the market. That's why the iPad is still dominant, and with the Kindle Fire that was launched this week, you can see what Amazon is trying to do in terms of taking out a whole set of features in order to make a $199 price point, yet still maintaining an experience that they can deliver along with the content that they have. And they actually are a very big contender to the market. So what we look for in the hardware and firmware side for technologies is anything that involves sensors. For example, sensors are a very important part of building the new set of experiences. Battery, storage, right? You need to have lower cost, higher capacity storage. We're also looking for virtualization kind of technologies which allow a tablet, right, to run perhaps different operating environments. In the software and services side, we are also looking for technologies that will help drive us into specific markets. So we want to drive our tablets into our tablet platforms with our OEM customers into markets like entertainment, enterprise, gaming, education. Those are the big markets which are developing right now for these types of devices. So we have software and services in that area that can partner with us. We are looking for that. The process, getting back to Vivian's question, is that Intel is a huge company. Intel Capital, or ICAP we call it, is the largest corporate investor in the world. We have over 266 companies on the portfolio worldwide. And we invest out of several funds, with the general fund, as well as specific China, India, Brazil funds, digital home fund, communications fund, and the most recent fund that we announced is called the Ultra Blue Fund. It's a $300 million fund that was launched in June. And what that does is it invests in the ecosystem of companies that provide technologies for the ultrabook category of product, which is really a hybrid of the best of laptop and the best of tablets, if you can imagine it. So the process for engaging is twofold, right? You pair it up with an ICAP investment manager that focuses on that specific domain, as well as you need to engage with the business unit. So I'm from the business unit, I'm from the networks and tablets business unit, and so you need to engage with people like me in business development, as well as our planning team. So the product planning team, as you can imagine, are the ones that figure out where to intercept a technology into our roadmap, which goes out 2 to 3 years. And so business development and planning in the business unit, and then of course an ICAP investment manager is the way we engage with Intel.
Bernard, you used to run the HP startup programs. Can you tell us a little bit about how one can be engaged with HP?
Well, so again, I'm not representing HP, so I'll describe it generally, but I would say that
for HP and any of the companies here, you're dealing with massive organizations. And Winston just said that he works for a business unit, and each business unit, and actually in some cases each business group or each product group, has their own initiative, their own goal, and the goal of business unit 1 may be different from, or in some cases conflicting with business unit 2. And so part of your challenge is to map what will trigger interest by somebody at that large corporation. So my role at HP was exactly that, to figure out where in the corporation, and HP is the largest IT company by revenue with about $130 billion. And so where in all these divisions would a startup's value proposition fit? In some cases there would be multiple potential answers. There would clearly, in some cases, be answers that, areas that would not even be worth engaging with because it just wouldn't make sense. But figure out, and it's partly your job, and it's partly the job of my esteemed co-panelists here, to figure out how things could, how that connection can happen. And the word of caution here, which I implemented at HP, is it's along the lines of what Andy Bechtolsheim said earlier about the horizon, but this is actually a reverse horizon. He was talking about the horizon of the vision. I'd like to talk about the horizon of the funding cycle. How much time do you have, right? And so if you're a typical startup, you probably have a time horizon for showing milestones that's between 6 and 18 months, right, on average. And so does the engagement with a given corporation or the given business unit of a corporation provide you with a measurable quality or quantifiable output that you can be satisfied with? Again, talking about HP here, I've run into all sorts of situations where in some cases I facilitated connection with a business unit, and immediately there was traction and things happened very well. In other cases, it seemed to be that the connection would work well, and a year later, still nothing was happening. And so you have to be very mindful of that impedance mismatch, if you will, or that the difference. I'll just use an animal analogy. Sometimes people talk about big corporations as the 800-pound gorillas or the elephants, right? So you're dancing with the elephants. Sometimes startups are referred to as gazelles. Well, gazelles and elephants and gorillas have different metabolisms, right? They walk and run differently, and you have to be comfortable with the fact that even though Andy said large corporations have a quarterly vision of things, the reality is that their roadmaps are 3-year or 2-year roadmaps, and if you're engaging with a product group for a particular opportunity, are you going to be patient to wait that long, bearing in mind that that roadmap might actually change? So you're not a big corporation, you're a gazelle. Your job is to run as fast as possible. In some cases, you just have to run past the gorillas and the elephants and let them graze where they graze and graze in other pastures. In many cases, there is actually an opportunity to collaborate with them, but the task at hand is, for you and my co-panelists, is what are those opportunities? Be over and beyond the technology engagements where you want some tools. At the big corporation, here are some tools, and they're free or they're discounted, or provide some kind of support, and that's great. But beyond that, to advance your business objectives, what are those areas where the gorillas and the gazelles and the elephants can graze together, all happy, and where things actually get done?
Thank you, Bernard. Wendy, you mentioned that you have experience working in partner management in both Oracle and SAP. Can you talk a little bit about the engagement with these large companies?
Yeah. So in the space where I was involved, for instance at SAP, it was mainly in the post-merger integration. So, for instance, in the product suite, enterprise performance management, about 4 companies, but every company had their legacy partner systems. Everybody has different standard, product, roadmap, and the service types, billable model, and so on. So we had to really evaluate all the existing customers and reselect them based on our technology criteria, certify them, and also look at the the target customer and market size, and also the technology space. For instance, some smaller companies that were acquired, their billable model is completely different from the big company, and some of them are like lump sum. No matter how long the project takes, it is one size of the billing model, which is very rigid for long-term implementation projects. So we restructure those, and also for certifying the partners, we have different levels of the partner engagement based on your technology, your the engagement of your project size, and also your future plan. Are you going to be also innovative? Do you want to co-develop? Do you want to build market together? It's not just an SI partner, because you can definitely open your doors to be a co-developer, in OEM in some of the software license, or remain in the consulting side. So there are a lot of opportunities for smaller companies that are acquired or even are waiting for acquisition, exit. So my experience just tells me that I think as a smaller company, you need to know where you want to exit, or which company you want to partner with, and what is your future plan. Do you want to be on the development side to OEM and then have compatible product roadmap, or just remain in the consulting space? I think both are very doable. For instance, currently I'm with the Fusion applications at Oracle. It's a huge application suite. So we work with a lot of third-party technology companies, from Ukraine or to everywhere globally, especially in some innovative products like CRM. They have a lot of third-party, add-on products in CRM, sales, marketing, and even in the Outlook, calendar management, and so on. So we work very closely, but the selection criteria is very strict. But once you enter the door, you can expand your involvement. So normally, if you get into the door and you work well with the development team or consulting organization, you win the trust. You can really have more and more opportunities.
Thank you, Wendy. Linda, would you like to comment on the engagement process, as well as, for example, what kind of technology areas that Microsoft would be interested in? Let's say even within mobile, there are so many different areas that one can build and point.
Okay, sure. So I'm going to take the questions differently, because I think most folks have sort of covered the kind of corporate mentality, or what the corporate looks for. Because I've been doing this for a number of years, and I sort of sat on the other side of the table as a venture investor. And watch these companies try to develop partnerships and relationships with the giants or the incumbents. I'll tell you something that I've seen that has been very successful for young companies to get the attention of big companies like Microsoft. One thing is tenacity. So have a person on your team that is tenacious, understands the org, understands the incentives, the structure of how to sort of navigate, and who all it takes is one person. So at Microsoft, we have an organization, and it's called the Field. They're distributed by local regions. So get to know that local office, get to know that representative. If it's someone in the Valley or someone in San Francisco, contact me and I can figure out who that person is. Secondly, Bernard talked about, and I can't drive this point home more, is have a well-articulated value proposition. So not only from a Microsoft standpoint, if you're developing soup to nuts, on our stack, come to me with a compelling customer value proposition. And so I deal with a lot of companies in the enterprise space that says, I light up feature X of product Y. So I help SharePoint users engage more deeply with some content. So be very, sort of crisp about where you fit within the organization and its customer base. So I say those are sort of the two things that I've seen entrepreneurs fail at a lot. They come to me and say, yeah, I'm doing something, and then they have no sort of sense of where it fits or what the end game would look like. And then finding that internal advocate. So it takes a lot of persistence, it takes luck, but I'd say tenacity is kind of the most important thing. Show up at the dev kitchens, know who the MVPs are, know who the local contacts are, go to the conferences, go to the meetups, whatever it is, right? Integrate it and become familiar with the organization and the people who are, within the relevant groups. And then, mobile is not my specific domain, but applications, absolutely. And so we've released a set of new camera APIs recently, and also deep social experiences are sort of two areas. So if you notice in the interface of phone and Mango and how it compares to other mobile devices in the market, you've got this tile feature which enables you to get real-time feeds and updates from all of your social media platforms, etc. So sort of leverage that, leverage the camera APIs, it's an augmented reality experience, you name it. Those are sort of the two areas. I think video is going to be very important very soon. We'll see. So those are probably the three key areas in mobile. And then just broadly across the org, just do it simply. Am I a consumer? Do I sell to consumers? Do I sell to enterprise customers? Businesses? And are they small businesses or are they large businesses? And then from there, it's very easy to figure out which division you fit into. Or I'm in an infrastructure play, or I'm in an application. And then we can sort of, my team, and you come to me, we can figure out what's the best place, the next contact point. It's a big part of what we do is we provide access. So we maintain relationships with the different business groups and product teams so that we can become your internal champion, your internal sponsor, and then not only match you or find you, who's that person in corporate, who's that person in the product team, or the marketing team, or the dev team that should be aware of you.
Thank you, Linda. Does anyone else want to comment on technology areas that your company would be interested in?
Sure, absolutely. I'd like to. If you're thinking of doing business with Salesforce, we have one focus for the company right now, and that's the social enterprise. Right? And let me just explain what I mean by that, because actually, Chatter is important, but that's just a product, right? So Chatter is a great collaboration product. But if you're United Airlines, 10 years ago, if you were traveling on United Airlines and you had a really bad experience, what would you do? You'd call it in to a call center, or you would write a nasty email, right? What do you do now? You Facebook, Twitter, or one enterprising guy stuck a baggage issue he had with United on YouTube. Had 750,000 hits in a week. If you're United Airlines, how are you controlling your brand when there's this whole thing going out there, this social world going out there? You don't have control of that anymore. When they were calling into your contact center, or when they were emailing you, you had some control over that. Although a lot of these airlines still did a good job of that. But how do you control that? Well, the social enterprise, what we've just done with KLM, for example, is we have a command center that monitors every single tweet, every single Facebook entry, YouTube video launched, and looks for keywords. And if it's your company, we'll find that and we'll address it, right? So KLM, wonderful story, right? They had a lot of bad issues after the merger and everything else they were going through. People were tweeting negative things about them. Now, every single one of those tweets is captured. By the way, when those tweets get captured, they also know where you are, right? So there's a SWAT team in the terminal at Amsterdam Airport with iPads who say, wow, This customer had a really unfortunate experience. They happen to be in the airport right now. They're boarding a flight from Amsterdam to Rome. Let's go find out. It pulls up their Facebook picture, so they know what they look like. They can track down the customer. They can track down the customer, and they give them gifts. The gift could be an upgrade. The gift could be a little toy, whatever, right? Now what is that customer tweeting? A whole different experience, right? Toyota, how many of you, when you get into your car, it automatically downloads via Bluetooth your phone book? Any of you? A lot of you. Well, what if it was downloading information about when your next service is due, or how much gas you need, right? Or the battery life, or oil life? What if the app on your phone then took that and said, let's book an appointment with Toyota, right? Let's book your next service, because we know it's coming up in 3 weeks. Or stick a reminder in your calendar to say, fill up gas tonight. Right? It's that type of technology that is of great interest to our customers, and therefore of great interest to us. So if you're working on innovative solutions to address the social enterprise and bridge that gap between the world of Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, smartphones, everything else, and the way corporations have conventionally worked, if you've got technology or services that can help us bridge that gap, we are very interested in you.
Anyone else?
So Microsoft, it's really simple. We've heard Rebecca highlight two of them. One of them is all about the cloud. So we have a cloud services platform that competes or is in the same market landscape as EC3, S3. It's called Azure. So if you want to build and run an application in the cloud, that's the most important. So if you're doing anything on Azure today, come see me. The second thing is phone. We talked a lot about mobile, so if you've got an interesting application that you'd like to launch or release on the phone, you can also come talk to me. And then third, if any of you saw some of the recent press coming out of our Build conference in Anaheim, it's all about Windows development and new web development, HTML5. So those are the three areas. If you're doing something in those areas, definitely come see me and we can sort of figure out if there's a path.
Yeah, let me just add a little bit to that from more specifically what we're looking for. So as I mentioned, we're looking for software and services that also get us into some key markets that are developing for tablets. So for example, now a lot of people are bringing tablets into enterprises, much more so than IT expected. But people are bringing it in, they're connecting it up to the back-end systems. And so one big emerging area is how do you secure all these sort of consumer market devices, whether it's a phone and now of course a tablet. A tablet is a much more high-performance device compared to a phone. There's a lot more data that sits on it. So what are the technologies that are involved in helping the enterprise manage a multi-OS environment? So right now, predominantly, we're all iOS devices, but then in the future, you can imagine more successful Windows devices from Microsoft, Android devices from the Google ecosystem. So when you have a multi-OS environment, what are the technologies required to manage these devices, secure them in a way that sort of doesn't completely infringe upon the personal use? Because you bought the device at Best Buy or Fry's, and now you want corporate access, and they're giving you corporate access. But then how do you sort of separate the management of those two types of data? So that's an emerging area that's very important. How do you securely manage these devices? Another thing that's very interesting to us is applications, right? So the biggest adopter of tablets in terms of enterprises is the financial sector. They are by far the ones that have deployed the most tablets. So whether it's finance or healthcare or retail, if you are developing apps on a tablet kind of platform, right? We're very interested to talk to you and find out what kind of insight you have into your specific market, what user experiences you're trying to solve. And then we would want to work with you and figure out what part of that technology and experience can be optimized on the Intel architectural platform. Because there should be a roadmap that says at the beginning, all of it is sort of software and it works with anybody. But then over time, we prefer that there's a roadmap towards an element of that technology that's optimized on the platform, because that's our business. So that's just an example in the enterprise space. In the entertainment space, the majority of the people that use tablets use it at home. 70% of the time, They're using it at home, they're watching video. So therefore, the emerging thing they're looking for is technologies that help you manage content across multiple devices. Because when you want to use it to watch something, video or social, you want to watch it anywhere at any time. So I want it on my TV, I want it on my tablet, I want it on my phone, and it crosses, right, throughout the day across these devices. So we're looking for technology that knows how to manage content across multiple devices in terms of the internet experience. That goes from codecs all the way down to recommendation engines. What should you look at on your TV versus your phone versus your tablet? So if you're working on any of these areas, please come help me.
Thank you, Winston. Earlier, you talked a little bit about the Intel capital investment, and Denzel talked a little bit about the different funds that are investing in the exchange platforms. Does anyone on the panel want to comment on what are the goals of these investments, as well as what kind of involvement your company like with the portfolio companies?
Sure. Well, I can speak for us. We have one objective, and it's growth. Because if you grow and you grow rapidly, you reinvest in us, and that'll spur more growth. So the number one thing we look for is growth. We like companies that come to us to be very aggressive, right? So if they're talking about 5% growth or 10% growth, we have zero interest. They're talking about several 100% growth, we're hugely motivated. So the number one criteria is growth.
Yeah, so for Intel, ICAP invests for several reasons, objectives. Right? One is return on investment, obviously, but also market insight. So there are a class of investments that they will do to just get insights into a very emerging market trend. And then the third area is business synergy. So there may be like the Ultrabook Fund, it's a great example. It's a very targeted fund, $300 million, that really wants to drive the ecosystem around a specific category of product. So the technologies we would look for in an Ultrabook type of fund would be very much tied to what are you innovating that helps that category of product take off. But those are the three areas. In terms of a typical stage, right? Intel is stage agnostic, meaning it has done all the Series A investments all the way to public companies. And the ideal time to engage is probably the Series A, maybe Series B timeframe. And the typical structure of a deal is usually multiple business units, as Bernard was saying, would get involved, right? So if you're doing something in mobile, there's a high chance that it will involve our phone group as well as our tablet group, and even now the PC group, because everybody is going into mobilizing the product, right? And so usually when you're doing something in the mobile area, it will involve 2 or 3 of these business units. Usually what happens is that we would actually have a project that's actually defined. So a project could be, you have this technology, it has already been vetted by our product teams and planning teams. We want to do a specific prototype with you, right, to validate whether this will work within our roadmap. And then as part of a project like that, Intel will participate in an investment along with other investors in that round. So usually there is a project that is defined. Sometimes there isn't, right? It doesn't always have to have a project. Where there is a project defined, it actually helps because that's how you get early access to technology. That's how you get, some kind of line of sight into a roadmap intercept. And then, of course, when the marketing kicks in and it launches, then you actually have a real distribution channel that Intel's partners would have. So what we look for at a high level is what is the technology? What is the IP? Because we're a technology-centric company. So the technology part of it is very important to us, right? Then the second part, of course, is team, and then the third is traction.
What about the involvement of, say, Intel or HP or Salesforce? Do you want a board seat? Do you want any kind of joint development with the startup?
Sure. Sorry, when we invest, we ask for a board observer role. So we don't want to have a board seat where we make decisions for them. We like to advise, so say what's going on, but allow the board to make their own decisions. But the board observer role actually allows us to track the financials, allows us to track the growth rates. So the only ask we have when we invest in a company is to give us a board observer role.
Yeah, the same applies for Intel. We take minority investments in these companies. The lead investor, which is typically a VC, would be around, and we would take an observer seat on the board. Some of the benefits that startups have had in working with Intel have to do with the fact that we are, as a strategic investor, we are well recognized within the venture industry, right? So when you walk into VC presentations and you say you have a pending deal where Intel is also investing in it, it actually opens a lot of doors, right? It carries on a weight. Not to mention the fact that investment by Intel then opens up doors within the whole of Intel. So you can participate in CEO Summit days, technology days, where you are actually demoing your product to hundreds of project teams across Intel. So those are some of the benefits. And some of the successes that we've had in terms of exits, right, companies like VMware, MySQL, LogMeIn, these are all software type companies, and even overseas companies like Sohu.com. So this just gives you sort of a breadth, an example of how we invest.
Chiming here. So at our side, the R&D co-development also is a big drive, especially in the industry vertical area. For instance, in utility GPU or insurance, life sciences, and so on, because those are very vertical markets, and that needs also expertise in that certain industry. So, for instance, utility GPU was having a big initiative to find new co-development partners, even overseas in India. So big and small, if you're a startup, that's also a possible way. Even on the big application suite side, you can also get your foot into the door, like Fusion side, even on the server side, Excavator. So there are a lot of different options. Really, I think you need to find your niche. And I think these days also, vertical, they have a lot of options to enter.
Thank you, Wendy. What about the way that the fund is structured? Do you usually participate in, say, a round that is set by Excel partners, or do you usually have a different structure on a deal?
We would typically have a venture capitalist lead on those terms. But we do work with, when we participate in the round, as I said, usually that there's a project defined that we would work with the startup on. We don't typically ask for exclusivity of issues, so there are no issues of trying to constrain what the deal looks like. But we're in it to make sure that at least there's a prototype that's being built, right? There's a roadmap of how that prototype will intersect with our roadmap, and hopefully lead to launch.
For us, we ask for there to be a co-investor. That doesn't have to be a VC, it could be a bank, it could be an angel investor, it could be any form of co-investment. We usually like the co-investor to match what we're doing, but if they can't, that's usually not a showstopper. We take less than 10% equity in the company, and we mandate a board of observer. That's it.
Yeah, I think those practices actually reflect a growing trend among corporate VCs, which is to steer away from the investment seen as a way to control the company and be more collaborative, because you have to realize that those corporate venture capital investments are made in the venture capital ecosystem, and venture capitalists are only motivated by return on investment. And so, if a corporation were to infringe on that, on those rules, then they get burned the next time around. So, corporate investors these days tend to be much more aligned with financial VCs, because they want to play this game for a long time. And certainly, Intel Capital is probably the one that has been playing that game for the longest time of all corporate VCs, and maybe of all corporates.
Yeah, I would say one caveat to that is, as I was saying, in the mobile space, right, there's a lot of innovation that needs to happen lower down the stack, right, in terms of hardware or firmware. So whether it's a display technology or it's a battery technology, or some sort of sensor, right? And so sometimes there's always a battle that happens internally that says, should we only invest or should we acquire? Because sometimes if we identify it as a very key technology, we want to be able to control it. And if we do that, we can acquire it. And so those things happen a lot too, right? So there's a lot of question that says, well, okay, what's the point of getting a minority stake in this type of battery technology when, you know, we help them grow to the next stage of evolution, and all of a sudden our competitors will come in and sort of take a controlling stake in the company. So there's for these types of foundational technologies, we take a more acquisitive kind of approach to it.
Last one, microphone, please. Hope that you can hear me. Does anyone want to talk about success stories with startups?
Oh, so the question was, can we talk about a success story? And sure, I can. So we have quite a few of them, but one that comes to mind, extremely relevant to accelerating platform, is a company called StoreSimple. StoreSimple, when our team started engaging with this company, was a very young, I think it was a Series A funded company that was helping basically move Microsoft applications to offline storage. And so when we launched our cloud product, Azure, they began offloading that storage to Azure. And so this tiny little company basically got sort of subsumed and sucked up into the channel, is a flourishing, high growth, one partner of the Curate Worldwide Partner Conference this past year, which is quite a formidable award, and just closed a massive amount of funding from Tier 1 investors on Sand Hill Road. And so I'd say that's really success for us, is proving out the case that 1 + 1 is greater than 2. So I think without the support and the help of Microsoft, particularly on the channel side and obviously on the technical adoption side, removing any of the technical hurdles, they were able to go to market much faster, much more cheaply, and much more focused, and raising a significant portion of capital from Tier 1 venture investors in the Valley, I think is a very good sign of early success. They haven't been acquired, but I think it's a big milestone.
From the consulting side, I'll give you one great story. There are many of them. I'll pick one. We helped a small consulting company out of Chicago. We funded them $500,000. They sold earlier this year for just under $100 million in 48 months.
That's a really good story.
Yeah. It's all about growth.
But I think what you heard on this panel is that various corporations define success in various ways. I think Denzel's been extremely clear. If you haven't gotten that, let me restate for you. He's looking for sales growth, right? So, if you have a product that will accelerate Salesforce.com's sales growth, you have a friend here. Other corporations are looking for technology partnerships. I think Winston emphasized that he's looking for the next gen technology. Maybe the sales growth would not be in the hundreds of %, but if you bring in the next technology, he's going to be happy. You have a friend on this panel for that, and so forth. And Ray and Linda also talked about their programs. And all of them have a different bend, and actually within the corporations, you can find multiple programs that sometimes have different bends. And so, at HP, I was basically I had a window of all these different programs, some of which were very developer focused, so technology access, support and whatnot were the focus. Others were really sales focused. Others were more business development focused, or insights focused, which was another thing that Winston mentioned. So all those things could be of value to you, but at this point in your startup, at this point in your roadmap, what do you need? What maps the best from all these standpoints: technology, sales, channel, access, business development alliances, and so forth, and or capital. And so all these things are legitimate topics to have with a legitimate conversation to have with a large corporation and a set of large corporations. But which are the corporations that, and which engagement modes best match your needs today, and your needs and your timeline. Again, referring back to what I was saying earlier about the your own runway.
Thank you, Bernard. With this, we'll open up the forum to questions.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Ian Griffin, and I've been a volunteer with ANZA for 5 or 6 years. And I used to work at HP. I was the speechwriter for Breath Energy at HP Labs. And I've got a question which maybe Bernard would be best to answer, but maybe relevant to the rest. It's a very basic question about approaching these large companies. I was an employee at HP. I was volunteering here, and a company a few years ago, ANZA, had a product they thought HP might be interested in, so on my own bat I kind of introduced them to an engineer at HP Labs instead of an informal meeting, and I got my wrist slapped by the corporate guys because they said, well, you know, we don't do it that way. We have a committee who reviews these small company meetings, because they were feeling that if one of their engineers met with an independent company that happened to be working on a product HP Labs was working on, there might be a legal implication, even if they didn't invest in that company, that they'd somehow suck the information out of the guy over lunch. And is that an issue that people need to be aware of when they're trying to get, you know, input, maybe an informal context?
Yeah. So I mean, I think the specific issue you're referring to is called IP contamination. So it's basically you're a startup, you're having a casual conversation with a large corporation about their plans. And lo and behold, that corporation actually was planning to get into this market, and you've just given the idea that needed to compete with you. So corporations are public. I mean, these are public companies. They don't want a lawsuit down the road where some entrepreneur says, "Well, I shared my plans with XYZ, and then he turned around or she turned around and competed with me." So that's exactly what this mandate, this corporate mandate, is referring to. But I would say if you're the innovator and you talk to in this case it was HP Labs, but if you talk to a corporate lab or some kind of a corporate innovation center whose mandate it is to create the internal innovation, you effectively are showing them that they haven't done their job, right? So there's also that ego aspect that you need to be aware of. So that doesn't mean you shouldn't talk to corporations. It means that when you talk to a corporation, you need to approach, you need to be mindful of this, but you also need to be aware of the other avenues, business engagement being where you can actually, or technology access, and so knock on the right doors. And let me conclude with maybe a kind of controversial statement, which is that the job of people like my co-panelists and mine before is really to figure out the engagement rules and the processes and the programs so that the universe of startups can nicely fit into the funnel that's digestible by a corporate entity. That's really, in a nutshell, that's the challenge. And so that's why you have these rules and processes and programs. As an entrepreneur, you need to be aware of those and leverage those and use them to your benefit. But you also need to be aware that you're an entrepreneur. Your job is not to abide by the rules. You have to create the rules. And so if it takes talking to the channel person, somebody who may be a reseller, that will get you the job done because they're a small organization, they have a customer that needs your solution, they're not encumbered by the corporate processes. You get your stuff to market, and then you can talk to the corporation and say, hey, the reseller XYZ of big company ABC has just implemented my solution, the customer's happy, now help me deploy this or resell this massively. That would be a non-traditional way of using the corporate channel. Another way that I've heard at a conference a couple of years ago was a guy was saying, somebody in this kind of position was saying, well, don't send an email to the CEO because it will get back down to me anyway. And my thinking was, well, actually, if it goes to the CEO and goes down to you, then you'll have an additional prod to get going. So the rules are for you to create, but these programs are for you to leverage based on how they match your roadmaps and your objectives.
Hi, this question is for Denzel. My name is Ravi, and you mentioned something about how you're develop this platform where people can tweet about their problems, and then your SWAT team comes and how do you deal with the credibility aspect? So like there are a couple of people who have the same problem, and you're addressing the wrong person because he just posted it because he wanted to free upgrade or something. How about somebody where the physical product is you can't send a SWAT team to the physical location, and it's somewhere on the internet, and this online vendor is selling their product? How do you assess the credibility of the person who just posts their real name, or their Twitter does not lead to a physical Facebook profile? Or how do you deal with those credibility?
Yeah, so good questions. The issue really that we're trying to solve is the fact that most of those corporations don't even know that conversation is going on in the first place, right? So once they find out about it, how they deal with it and how they put processes in place is really something they will drive. Now, we can help from an innovation technology perspective to say, let's look at your business processes, let's validate it, because we deal with, if you're an insurance company, we'll tell you best-in-class practices that other insurance companies do without violating IP. So we can help validate it, we can help even build, we can leverage our consulting partners to come in and maybe craft a solution, or our ISV partners to come and build an app. But how the customer solves that problem is really for them to drive, right? We become an advisor at that stage. The first issue we're trying to address is how do you get them involved and engaged in the social conversation when today most corporations just aren't. Did that answer your question? Thank you.
Yeah, hi. This question probably for Bernard, based on what your feedback to the earlier questions. So let's just say, hypothetically, a major vendor in your space says, say I'm a corporate development person, gives you a call, and you've had some conversations before then. Why don't you come into our office in London and meet with our technical people who are happy to sign NDAs because we'd like to know more about what's under the hood.
All right, so let me restate the question both to make sure I understood it and for everybody to know what it is. So the question was, what if a big corporation invites you to their headquarters so you can meet with their engineers under NDA? What's the appropriate response? Well, first of all, make sure you have the NDA is standard, right? And then the NDA doesn't mean you have to disclose everything. The NDA means that whatever you disclose is under an NDA, but it doesn't say that you have to disclose everything. So if there are too much secrets you want to withhold, it's not because you signed the NDA that you have to spill the beans, as it were. And then you also have to gauge in the conversation what the objective or what the outcome would be of that meeting. If it is a sophisticated form of intelligence gathering, or if there is truly an opportunity for collaboration. And so you can ask that team what other agreements they've done, what other engagements they have that would be comparable, history points, and again, from a future perspective, what happens if the team in London, in your case, says, yeah, this is your startup's technology is legit, and then what? And so I think that's it's hard to give you a binary answer, yes or no, do this, don't do this. I think it's very much based on the parameters and the chemistry and what other information you're able to gather on the dynamics of that conversation. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, probably if you get a chance later, I'd like to
a little bit more.
If we work with one of you guys, does that limit our options for acquisition by your competitors? So if you work with Microsoft, does that stop us from getting acquired by their competitors in the field?
That's a great question. So I definitely encourage all of my companies to be almost agnostic. And so you pick a go-to-market partner, you pick a technology partner that makes sense for your business and your customers. But you definitely do not want to position so tightly. And I've seen companies do this in the past. They position so tightly with one of our products that they actually do hinder their ability to go out and raise further money or sort of take themselves away from this acquisition. But if you build a business that has horizontal applicability, yet you are mining one particular vertical or one particular channel, then you should actually be okay. Having sat on the other side too as a venture investor and exited other companies and had this discussion over and over with how tight and how close you get to partners. You do definitely want to have two horses in the race. If a company comes to me and says, "Hey, I've just done a deal actually with Salesforce," we see that a lot, especially in the enterprise place. I say, that's great, because the more success you have is better for me, right? Broadly speaking, right? Even though it is possibly going towards a competitor, possibly going to Microsoft, but my first priority is your business, right? How do you thrive as a business? Because if you can't thrive as a business, then that's zero share for me, right? So.
I think there are cases where it will and cases where it won't. So in cases where it won't impact the ability of a competitor to acquire you, you've basically defined in how you've struck technology deals and business deals that you're still able to conduct business elsewhere, and that's key. And so there are instances, for instance, there was a key partner, I think, of Alcatel's, that got acquired by a competitor, and Alcatel overnight was deprived of a major coverage of their markets as a result. So that would be an example where working with that particular corporation did not hurt the chances, but actually increased the value in a competitor's eye. Conversely, you saw recently the AT&T T-Mobile acquisition saga, and one of the issues for T-Mobile is that they've made a technology choice that makes it unappealing for other operators besides AT&T to acquire them, right? So they've made a technology choice in this case, which hurts them because they had one shot and now that shot is gone.
Yeah, maybe I'll talk a little bit from the mobile perspective. I mean, there's a lot of fragmentation in the mobile world, right? If you're a developer of some kind of app or software, you need to think about what operating system you need to be on. Sometimes you wonder, if you get into one camp, does that mean you're sort of totally blocked out from another camp? I think it's not so much that you're blocked out from the other camp, because within mobile you're expected to support multiple platforms anyway. I think how judicious you are in prioritizing which platform you want to use will actually lead to the right acquisition potential, right? So an example recently is, of course, Google buying Motorola, right? Motorola, for many years, had 5 or 6 different mobile operating platforms, right? So they were building phones across 5 different OSs, right? And then when they had to restructure, they actually got rid of everything and just went into Android as the #1 platform. And then, to everyone's surprise, they got bought by Google, because Google really needed to have a tier 1 handset manufacturer that they could actually bring into their house, so that they could sort of optimize an experience all the way from the app to the OS, all the way down to the device, right? Now, they did that because Motorola had decided to prioritize on Android, and they had a lot of software engineers that knew how to optimize their stuff on specific handsets in the market. So that's just an example where Motorola was playing in multiple camps. They decided to focus on one, and it ended up being an acquisition target to a surprising acquirer, which is someone that actually just does ads, right? You can imagine why they would buy a handset manufacturer. But it turned out to be that way. It was a strategic move.
To add something on top of that, I think two things I wanted to mention. One is, globalization is very, very key for a startup. Early on, you just you have to think from the global sense, not just I'm focusing on English user or North America, but nowadays any space you gotta be globalized. They really at the early stage. So I worked with a startup which was a part of my article. At the beginning, their product was only supporting English, North American only, and so we had to re-architect the whole product. And because once you're bought, you are facing hundreds of thousands of sales force. They ask you, how can I sell your product in Middle East, in China and Japan? So we really made big efforts to restructure, re-architecture, reprogram the whole product, and finally we were able to support the product with over 20 languages within 1.5 years. But it's a huge effort. So if you already are considering the globalization at early stage, I think you can have more valuation for sure, because your money size is definitely much bigger. The other thing is technology agnostic. I think is very important. I worked with a BI company also, which initially was only working with SAP exclusively in the BI space, and then it saw the huge market increase in the business intelligence area. Then they really changed the technology, but they're mainly in the consulting area. And they entered the Oracle BI space. They're very big now in working with all the BI EPM products. So I think globalization, technology agnostic are very important early on.
From the Salesforce perspective, if you're an integrator, we're not going to give you money to do so you can get better at Microsoft integrations. So you're going to be with us, or we're not going to give you money.
One last question.
Thanks, Scott. I'm wondering now would be willing to share with us an inside tip that each of you personally have in terms of maximizing our chances of getting your attention. Like I've heard your shopping list or your corporate strategies. Let's assume that you get 100 inbound emails per day. What are the chances of getting that one to be open and responded to? For example, I'm a venture capitalist, and I'll share with Tim, which most people already know, and that is that if you have somebody that I know sends your business plan to me, that greatly increases the chances that I'll open it and respond in a shorter amount of time. Just because all else being equal, at least I owe my friend a response, in addition to the fact that someone else may have pre-screened it. So if you'd be willing to share at least an inside tip or two about maximizing our chances of getting your attention, that'd be great. Thanks.
Well, I can just talk from our perspective. We even though we're a $2.5 billion company, we're only 12 years old. There's a culture within the company that every chatter, every tweet, every email we respond to. And I would actually challenge you to send an email to our Chairman and CEO, Mark Benioff, marc@salesforce.com, and see if you don't get a response. He responds to every single email, and that's the culture that's pervasive within our company.
So I'll give you two tips. The first one is substantive, so it's about the value proposition, what we talked about earlier. When you address an audience, wherever it is, you have to match the message to the audience so the audience responds in the most effective way. So it's basically principle of communication. So if you're able to frame, if you were to send an email to Denzel and you said, hey, I have 3 customers, I run on Salesforce.com, and I've been able to increase their whatever by 300%. Denzel will respond to that email also, but he'll put it at the top of the pile because that's his trigger. And so what can you frame in your email that will trigger a response? And if you say, hey, I'm you know, the 15,000th social media company, and I'm looking for funding. Can you respond to me? You know, it's not very appealing. It doesn't talk to the trigger that the recipient is looking for. The second tip is really more about the form. You know, if you started the email by saying, "Hey Scott, you know, I'm looking, open this email because there's an interesting opportunity that maps to this theme," then there's a higher chance that Scott will open the email. If it just says, if it looks like an advertisement and it says information, or it's a generic title, there's a lesser chance it'll get open. And this is one of the principles of email marketing that you can apply to your own benefit as well.
Yeah, let me add to that for Intel. So, the tablet market is evolving at rocket rate, right? I mean, who knows what it will look like in the next 1 or 2 years, right? So what we value when we look at things that excite us are companies that are doing something in this space, phone and tablets, where they have a unique insight into the market. What people want to do with these devices in the next 1 year or 2. What do they know about it? Secondly, how that translates to an experience that they can actually deliver, right? So understanding what the market wants, which is very challenging because it's a very, very fast-moving market. Understanding what is the unique experience they need to deliver. And thirdly, very importantly, why does that experience, or how can that experience be optimized on an Intel platform? That third part is always missing sometimes. If you write an email and you says, "I'm going after financial market, and I know that they want this because I have all these data points from my customer. Here's the specific experience I'm delivering to allow a financial professional to do something better. And here's why I think if you deliver this on an Atom chip, that it's going to do so much better in terms of experience, battery, performance, and all that." It's hard to get to that level, but I think when you network with different parts of Intel, you can start to understand what are all the different sort of product directions in general, strategically, and you start to articulate it in those 3 things. If you do that, you will get my attention, you will get ICAP's attention.
I just want to briefly mention something else. I think also it's very tricky to find the right person within a huge company. So one of my experience was there's a company really on the heavy engineering side. So at the beginning, they try to work with the marketing team, and of course, they don't understand how this can solve the bug problem, reducing the bugs and so on. So then I help them navigate to the right engineering VP so that they understand the value proposition, how I can really reduce your development